The music box's origins can be pinned back as far as the 13th century. It wasn't until the 1800s that it became big in Switzerland. Switzerland was known for its watchmaking, which is a big reason the music box originated there. The music box's design and inner workings were based on that of what clocks and watches had. It operated by spinning a disc or rotating a cylinder with ridges or openings on it against a steel comb. Music boxes were very popular in Europe during the 19th century. Shortly after the business was introduced in America, however, Thomas Edison's phonograph, invented in 1877, rose to popularity in the early 20th century, essentially wiping out the music box industry at this time. Music boxes are still made today, but they are not nearly at the level of fame they were about 150 years ago. The phonograph was the first invention to record and reproduce sound. Its initial medium of sound were wax and cardboard cylinders. The sound was engraved into their sides and would be read with a needle, which would reproduce the sound by amplifying the hills and valleys of the grooves. The height of its popularity would be roughly from 1896 to 1915. By the mid-1910s, though, cylinders began to drop off. Columbia Records, a mainstay record label, was selling cylinders as well as discs, which were first introduced very early in the 20th century. In 1912, Columbia had dropped cylinders in favor of discs, and by the 1920s, discs had won the people over. It had now become the prominent form of audio playback. Phonographic discs, most commonly known as records, were first introduced in the very late 1890s and early 1900s. They were first made of a resin called shellac. Shellac records are often given the nickname 78s. This is because the standard RPM that was established by 1925 was 78 RPM. In the early 1930s, the very first modern records were produced, pioneering the long-lasting standard of 33 1/3 RPM. They were also made of the plastic compound that all records are made of today, vinyl. Many people have also nicknamed records based on this compound.
Wondered, what exactly is 180-gram vinyl?
It is time for a vinyl update.
The double LP, and it came on colored vinyl.
Love that. Ooh, that is crisp and gorgeous.
Like Lee Hazelwood, pretty epic.
It wouldn't be until 1948 that these vinyl LPs, or long-playing records, would become commonplace in the market of popular music. 1 year after, the 7-inch single boasting an RPM of 45 was introduced. It would go on to become a staple of jukeboxes in the future. While we're on the topic of sizes here, old 78 records most commonly came in the sizes of 10 and 12 inches in diameter.
That's quite big. Impressive.
33 1/3 RPM records of today most commonly come in the size of 12 inches, while 45 RPM records most commonly come in the size of 7 inches.
Ooh, that's kind of small.
There are no restrictions, however, as sometimes a 7-inch can be 33 1/3 RPM and vice versa. The advent of vinyl as a material was incredibly important to records. Vinyl is a much more durable material than shellac, as it is less likely to break or snap, and vinyl records could endure more plays than shellac records before getting worn out. Vinyl records also introduced tinier grooves, allowing for more music to be fit onto a disc. After the introduction of vinyl records, 78s slowly faded from the mainstream and were pretty much gone by the end of the 50s. In the 1930s, a brand new form of audio playback was developed in Germany, which utilized an entirely new material, magnetic tape. These early machines that utilized magnetic tape came to be known as reel-to-reels, as the tape was strung between two reels. The use of this material would be extremely important for new forms of audio playback to come in later years. In 1963, despite being scrutinized for their questionable quality down the line, one of the most revolutionary forms of playback was introduced, the compact cassette. Though it did not take the public by storm immediately, it gradually became popular and peaked during the 80s, coexisting with the already present vinyl record. The main feature that so many people loved about it was the size. People could go on walks and go places with just a Walkman and a set of headphones. They could take music on the go, proving that the Walkman was an unquestionable precursor to what we are now so used to today. The cassette was not perfect though. They degraded much faster than records, were prone to getting tangled in players, and for a listener to go to a certain song they wanted to hear, they'd have to rewind or fast forward, thus degrading the tape further. Laserdiscs are important to the history of audio and video playback, as they were the first optical discs available to the public. Laserdiscs built off of the foundation of vinyl records in that they were discs. These large discs are where the future of audio and video playback would diverge, as it undeniably influenced the DVD and the CD, which were both read by a laser. This makes for a perfect transition into the next huge audio playback phenomenon, the compact disc. In 1982, the minds of Sony and Philips came together to create the item that would litter the bedrooms of Generation Xers and Millennials. It was created with the sole purpose of eliminating the need of phonographic records, and it did so successfully. Not only did it completely wipe out the mainstream market for vinyl records, but compact cassettes were wiped off the mainstream market as well. CDs were far more durable than both of these formats. They could hold much more space and have been found to last up to 100 years before degrading. Beginning development in the very late 80s and going public in 1995, the MP3 changed the landscape of music and audio forever. It allowed for downloads of music across the internet and allowed for quick playback on the new technologies of the 90s and the 2000s. MP3 didn't initially harm the CD market, but slowly over time won the popularity of people with its convenience. CDs are still being sold everywhere today, just not at the rate they were being sold in the 80s and the 90s. In the late 2000s and 2010s, streaming services for music were becoming incredibly popular. Services and websites like SoundCloud, Apple Music, Spotify, and Prime Music are titans when it comes to music providers of today. Streaming has undoubtedly become the most popular source of music among the billions of music listeners of today. Spotify is the leading music provider with over 200 million users as of 2019. It would seem that streaming is the final frontier for audio playback, but who knows if someone will come up with a greater idea. As of now, most listeners rely on streaming and MP3 files for their music. Some formats have had their own resurgences, much to the music industry's surprise. Cassettes and vinyl records have had resurgences, but the vinyl record is another story. It's taken the public by storm and has become a cultural phenomenon. Recording Industry Association of America stated in a 2016 shipment and revenue statistics report that shipments of vinyl albums were up 4% to $430 million and comprised 26% of total physical shipments at retail value, their highest share since 1985.
Whoa, that's a genuinely shocking fact.
Since vinyl seemingly died out in the 90s, no one ever thought it would come back to popularity. However, right around when sales were hitting rock bottom in the mid-2000s, it began to trend upwards. In 2006, there were only 900,000 vinyl records sold. In 2018, 12 years later, 16.8 million were sold. It's no question that vinyl is here to stay for another length of time.